Well, hello and good afternoon. I thought it would be good to speak to you this afternoon from outside. One of the positive effects of this horrible crisis we're going through is the benefits to the environment and the outside. It's actually peaceful. There might even be birdsong in the background, so maybe that'll be there to enjoy. But this afternoon I just wanted to particularly chat with you for a little while just about where we are in the current crisis and how things are looking. Everybody is keen to try to work out how this situation eventually comes to an end and what is the exit route out of this crisis into the future. And that's something that I'd like to spend a few minutes just exploring with you this afternoon. So as we came into the crisis, clearly it's primarily a health crisis. It's very much come about because of the nature of our global environment, global economy. A lot of international travel. Things spread much faster than they would have done maybe even 50 years ago in terms of people moving from one place to another, and we saw how that impacted tremendously on the spread of the virus across the world. As we look forward, maybe that's up for consideration. Maybe that will have to change a little bit as we look forward. So that's one area we might want to explore. Secondly, we've also experienced isolation to some extent at least. People are much less connected physically than they are in normal circumstances, and that's had an impact on business tremendously. We've seen the economy to a very large extent just shut down in a very short space of time, and we've seen this very steep decline in business activity, which will without doubt feed through into the numbers as they come out over the coming weeks. We will see probably the steepest decline since the Great Depression of the 30s in terms of the economy just being shut down and demand totally falling away in a number of areas. The big question, of course, is how quickly we can get back up and running again. So one of the first considerations that I know we've been looking at over the last few weeks is cash flow. Cash is everything in this current crisis. Being able to sustain your business through the crisis, so you can trade through it and come out the other side, is the critical issue for every single business. Now, some businesses clearly are in better positions than others. Some have got large cash reserves, which is very helpful at a time like this. Many haven't. Some businesses have not had their revenue impacted particularly severely. Others have, and the degree varies enormously. But in whatever situation we find ourselves, the really important thing over these coming few weeks is to make sure that we can keep going from a cash point of view. That really means constantly looking at our income versus our expenditure and keeping them as close as possible to balance. So whilst business interruption loans and other forms of finance have their place, the really important thing to sustain is having income and expenditure as close to balance as you can possibly manage, partly by using the government schemes, the furloughing scheme, as well as the interruption loan scheme, to try to make that happen. If you're in a position where expenditure is constantly outstripping income, it's just building up debt, which will be a real problem going forward. And also the fact that we know that some of these schemes are going to take a little while to come through. The business interruption loans are much slower than we would have liked to come through. More capacity is being opened up, but that's still an issue. The furloughing scheme, there's lots of stories around about how quickly the cash will come through, but some are saying it might not be until June. So can we keep going till then? So cash is absolutely key to this situation. And I think what's come out of this whole thing is global cooperation, not just around travel, although that's vitally important if we were to hit another one of these pandemics in the future, but also around global action to deal with the fallout from the crisis in terms of what the impact on business and the business world and in revenues and in government revenues. So what have we seen so far? Well, we've clearly seen a reduction in mobility. Mobility locally to get around and do things. That's clearly a massive issue. But so is international travel, and mobility internationally is very difficult too. Also our ability to meet with our customers face to face. Very many of us do that in the normal course of events, but just at the minute we can't meet our customers face to face for the most part. That makes life a lot more difficult. So there's been a lot more movement towards this kind of medium where we interact with our customers via video links or telephone or other ways. There's a lot of fear and anxiety still around. You don't need to go far, do you, to find that. Some people just are more anxious than others by nature, but certainly there's varying degrees of anxiety around, will I catch the virus? What impact will that have on me? Will my staff get the virus? Will I have lots of absences for that? What environments are going to be safe spaces and which environments are not going to be terribly safe? There's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty around that. Not least because the science has not really quite got to grips with everything yet. So that's a thing we're going to have with us, I think, for a number of months yet. And then we're seeing rapidly changing behaviour amongst the public. So clearly one big thing is the shift even further towards purchasing things online, trying to avoid personal contact. So that means online deliveries, and other ways of accessing products and services remotely. That's a huge increase in that, and some of that I suspect will stay. Even when the crisis is over, people will continue to interact in that way in some cases rather than going back always to the physical or the face-to-face. We saw that in the last recession with the supermarkets, the shift towards other forms of purchase rather than going to the supermarket once a week and filling up the trolley. That never really came back, and I suspect some of these things will not come back either. Obviously we have seen a surge in demand for some products, and some businesses are struggling with that. We might say it's a nice problem to have, but it's still a problem. So the food retailers, the food manufacturers, medical supplies and equipment that's needed for medics treating the virus, and all those sorts of things, we've seen a big demand increase for those things and companies struggling to meet that increased demand. And then the impact on the environment, which I mentioned at the outset, so we can see that's beneficial in many, many ways. The air seems cleaner when you go for a walk, you seem to hear more birds singing, that kind of thing. So that's something positive which I suspect people won't want to throw away too easily. Having gone through the pain that we have, the idea will be, can some of those things stay? Can we take advantage of some of those changes and not go back to driving our cars all over the place all the time? Maybe there is more advantage in having remote conversations with people sometimes, and reducing that travel that had become such a problem really for our economy and for the road network and so forth and so on. I think one of the things that we'll see coming sadly over the next few weeks is unemployment. I think we'll see the unemployment rate rise. I think there are a lot of companies, not those in our network of course, but a lot of companies where people have been kidding themselves that things are going to be okay and they're just hoping for the best, crossing their fingers, and they'll find that actually they've run out of cash and they can't pay their staff and they'll have to lay them off, and all kinds of other reasons where the business just really cannot keep itself going. And I think we will see a number of business failures over these next few weeks, and sadly the loss of employment that will come with that, and the loss of income that will come with that. So that's something I think we've got to expect to see happen. I think there are three groups of people. There's the eternal optimists, who we perhaps might say are a bit unrealistic sometimes, but always think things will work out well. And there's the ones at the other end of the scale, the glass half empty people that always see doom and gloom with everything. And there's those in the middle, where we might like to perhaps we'd call them sober people, those who will try to get a dose of reality but at the same time have an optimistic outlook for the future. And I think if you're one of those, then we do know this crisis is very likely to be temporary, almost certainly. There will come a time when this fades as a big issue and becomes less of an issue. We don't know all the collateral damage, but there will come an end to this crisis, and we need to plan to be there and to take advantage of that when it comes. The fact it could be worse, you know, we could be in a worse situation than we are currently in lots of different ways. But we also need to learn the lessons of this crisis, what it means for our businesses, and in particular what it means for the future and how we need to re-engineer our businesses to fit into the new global environment. So we talked about cash flow. That will be equally important going forward as it is now. And managing our contracts. So our customers' situations are changing. Maybe we sell to other businesses, or maybe we sell direct to the public. But in either case, our customers' behaviour will change, is changing. They've had to respond. So some customers will find themselves, some end customers will find themselves in difficult financial circumstances, and they won't be able to spend except on essentials. Are the people you sell to likely to fall into that category? And therefore your customers, it's not that they don't want to buy your product, perhaps they won't be able to for a period of time. So is that a likelihood? Is that something to plan for? Clearly those maybe in the public services and the essential services, less likely to affect them. Those that are working in occupations that are more discretionary, certainly the leisure industry, the hospitality industry, those sorts of areas, people are likely to be in difficult circumstances. Do you sell your product to a lot of those kind of people, and are they going to be affected? And the businesses that you sell to, if you sell to businesses, are they likely to be businesses impacted adversely by the crisis, or are they the kind of businesses that will carry on pretty much as normal, or even with increased demand? So analyse your customers. Try to work out, are they the kind of businesses that are going to come out of this fairly unscathed, or are they the kind that are going to come out needing to change and perhaps with smaller budgets to spend? What about scenario planning? So planning different scenarios, maybe 2 or 3 different scenarios you can plan to think forward and think, what might the world look like? And we can't be 100% certain, so it's worth maybe sketching out 2 or maybe 3 different scenarios and business plans that would then sit behind each of those scenarios, how you would plan your business depending on how things actually evolve. Which people, being harsh, do you really want to keep in your business, and which people might you need to let go? Perhaps it's one of those things you've been wrestling with for a while and have not made that tough decision, but maybe now is the time to let people go that are not going to be crucial to your future, and to keep hold of the people that you really need to look after, because they will be critical to helping you. Technology, the use of technology, absolutely crucial. We've got a great course running at the moment called Digital Leaders. It's completely free, it's funded by the government, and if you're interested in getting onto that, then there are still a few places left. That would be a great resource for making sure that you're really up to speed in the use of technology and taking full advantage of that in your business to grow your business and to react in a way that your customers will find appropriate in helping them to deal with the current concerns that they might have. And then looking at your revenue models, so would a subscription model, people paying monthly perhaps rather than one-offs, maybe that would help people with cash flow issues, whether they're individuals or whether they are businesses. If their cash flow is suffering as a result of the difficulties, could you help them by giving them a payment plan? Maybe you've never done that before, but maybe it's something that would be worth considering. Would it help to retain those customers with a payment plan? And then how do you sharpen your offer to serve what your customers want? So taking a bit of time to really think through, how are your customers impacted by this current crisis? How might you help them in dealing with it as individuals? How would your service or your product actually support people who are grappling with the issues that we can all see around us at this current point in time? So can you become more relevant in the way that you're delivering your service to help people with the health issues, the psychological impacts, all these sorts of things that they're probably grappling with at the moment? And then how are you going to build a pipeline of business? Really crucial. So maybe you're one of those businesses where your pipeline of business has really dried up, maybe partially, maybe fully. How do you reopen that? Are there new channels that you can open? Are there new customers that you can get to? Somebody said to me, for example, the pub trade is in a really bad state. Will we just suddenly all go back to pubs again? Or could a pub offer a different service where the chef actually comes out and cooks in people's homes for parties and things of that kind? Might that be something that customers would find more attractive at the moment and be more willing to spend their money on? Then it's not always about being cheap, so you might need to charge more for that, and perhaps people will be prepared to pay more because they want safety as of more importance than price at this point in time. So we might find as a result of these changes that people are less focused on price and how cheap things are, and more focused on a service delivered to them in a way that they find acceptable and helpful in the current environment. So think about how we build a pipeline of new customers and make sure that we've got new opportunities coming through, and how might you go about doing that? What marketing would you need to employ to reach people? So these are all areas we'll be looking at in more depth over the course of the coming few weeks. We'll be running some marketing seminars online to talk about some of these issues, about how you might gear up your marketing to get new propositions out to your customers. We'll be certainly continuing to look at the financial impacts and the cash flow issues and so forth, and we'll be having some online workshops on that. And planning. We'll be definitely holding some sessions on how to maybe do that, and maybe doing it in groups. It's amazing what you can do online. So actually having online groups where we could plan together and bounce ideas off each other. So some of those are the things that are coming. This hopefully is just giving you some food for thought in terms of starting to scenario plan. That's really what it is for the future. None of us know exactly how it's all going to pan out, but I think we're going to see a gradual lifting of restrictions. It won't be a sudden switch. And I think people's behaviour, despite whatever announcements are made from government, people's behaviour will evolve gradually. People won't suddenly go back to how they were a couple of months ago. It will be a gradual process. And some changes are probably here for good. And we can argue about whether that's good or bad, but I think that's the reality. And identifying what those are and planning for them is key now. Hopefully that's been helpful. We'll look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thanks.